Welcome to the new episode of the Radio Data podcast. Today, our expert guest is Dainius Kniuksta, who lives in Copenhagen in Denmark, and he works as an AI product lead at Forecast. Forecast is the work intelligence company, and we'll be talking about using data and AI in project and people management. However, as always, let's start with the introduction. Dainius, could you please introduce yourself and your company to our audience?
Alrighty, hello everyone. Thanks, Adam, for inviting me to your podcast. My name is Dainius, and I have been extremely passionate about one thing all my professional life, and that's solving real-world problems with technology. And I have a very strong personal preference towards that technology, being specifically AI technologies. So I think I've been in the field now for almost 20 years, somewhere in between 15 and 20, depends on how you count. And I've always kind of tried solving real world problems. So, that's, I guess, one of the reasons why I'm not working for social media companies. I still think they create more problems than they solve. But that's a separate podcast episode, I guess. Currently at Forecast, and we're trying to help people manage their work pipelines better. And we're focusing on companies that are project-based. So they have a set of clear deliverables. Very often those deliverables are actually to the external client. So we're mostly focusing on consultancies, agencies, software houses, marketing houses, big and small. Our customers range from 10 people, bespoke design agency, to a 3,000 people software and AI development consultancy. And they all have one thing in common. They want to make the best out of the resources that they have, and their most precious asset and resource is their people. So how you make sure that you utilize your available resources and manage your work as it flows through the company is extremely important to them. And this is the niche that we decided to tackle, not just with a Kanban board, which is a very common approach. If you look at, companies like Mondays and Asanas of the world, it's mostly focusing on, how the work flows through some kind of set of statuses. But we figured that there's actually more, and those two specific things that were kind of always missing in our heads was one, that AI is more or less underutilized, or even if it is utilized, it's mostly for kind of mechanical, mundane tasks. Oh, can you pre-fill my fields with my most common values and so on? That's kind of a trivial and very low value, I would say, type of task to try and deploy AI for. And the second one is what we call integrated intelligence. There's a set of principles that we bake into our product. One of them is ask me once, use always. So instead of having to update manually, in this screen, this person is working on this task. Now you go to the sprint, and in the sprint, people every morning do their daily stand-ups, and they have to update their statuses there again. Then you want to do some invoicing. You need to again manually include all of the relevant work and so on. So it's kind of the user keeps inputting the same and the same and the same, just in different contexts. And that's one of the easiest examples to kind of showcase what we mean by integrated intelligence. We try to make, from the user's perspective, completely invisible where AI kicks in, where it ends, where we need some kind of interaction from the user, and then feedback all of that again into our proprietary models. So that's what we call the integrated intelligence, and I think this is a very big differentiator for us. And if you don't want to take my word for it, I have my favorite customer quote when they saw one of our recent releases. I think it was end of last year. They said, "Okay, I don't know how Forecast knows this. This is witchcraft, but I love it." And this is how I know that I did my job well as a product leader in this organization. That's exactly what I'm after. I'm after happy customers who could not care less how this came about, but they find it valuable, they love it, and it's actually useful and valuable in the day-to-day operations. So that's the best recognition.
I have a number of follow-up questions, but maybe we can start first with the data. So could you please describe what type of data do you collect or do you have at Forecast?
So we're not an entirely new company. We've been around for a bit longer than 5 years, I think almost 6 or something like that. And so far, our customers have managed to completion about 200,000 distinct projects. And by projects, I mean the totality of the holy trinity of a project. So you have information about the budget, What is going to be my cost? What is my margin? If we're talking about agencies, the margin aspect is extremely important. What is my revenue? Is it T&M? Is it fixed price? And all of the budget and financial details. Then, of course, you have the scope bubble. And in the scope bubble, that's all about what exactly needs to be done. Do we know it? Do we not know it? If it's an agile project, sometimes you don't know the full details. If it's more of a waterfall, we have customers who operate purely in waterfall fashion. They spend significant time scoping out the project down to a single task level and allocate people, to those specific tasks. So that's kind of the third big component of project management. And of course, the last one is time dimension. Are we going to make it on time? How much time do we have it? And people keep making trade-offs. So our data revolves around these three aspects. So the work that needs to be done, the assets that you have to do the work with, and the time dimension. And of course, budget covers your assets as well, depending on how much you want to deploy your teams or any other asset. So we have managed more than 200,000 projects so far. I think last time I checked, it was about 8.5 million tasks in terms of distinct data points. So that's also interesting. And I think the total value, if we look at financial value of the projects that we have seen through forecast, is exceeding $2 billion right now. So it is quite a lot that we have already seen through our platform. Of course, a lot of that information is anonymized and so on. I mean, we're a European startup, so we know how Europe thinks about data privacy and protection and so on. So I think this also kind of baked from the very early days this attitude that it's not Wild West of data. It's not like we're gonna go and left and right and expect everything. So I think in the beginning, maybe it was a bit of a creativity killer, if you know what I mean, especially compared to some of our competitors who operate in other continents. But now we're seeing actually the benefits of it, that because we kind of adhered from the very beginning to those data accessibility and other regulatory standards, we have actually less and less problems over the long run when some of our competitors who started off in a completely random fashion now are getting questions asked by their customers and they don't have an answer to that. So I think that's kind of the second dimension that has contributed quite greatly to our approach to managing data. And I think the last piece is, of course, AI. We try to utilize all of that data so that we can provide tailored and personalized experiences. As I like to say sometimes to my teams, there are things that are roughly standardized, at least on a regional level or maybe even on a continental level, how you do accounting, P&L, general ledger. There's regulation. And if we want to support companies, who need to close the year and they need to export all of their invoices into some kind of, accounting system and provide all of the books for review or for inspection by auditors or whatever, that's pretty much standardized. But there's no golden standard how people manage their work. I've heard so many companies say, "Oh, we're an agile company and we're using Scrum, and the keyword is but we're not doing that, but we're doing this differently, but. So that also, dictates how we approach actually manipulating and transforming the data so that we can actually provide those learnings to our customers by acknowledging the fact that we're not trying to kind of, shoehorn everyone into one flow. If you say you're doing Scrum, that you should be doing it like this. We do support you if you want to do Scrum by the book, but we will not, blame you for not being very diligent with your processes. And I think this is one of also key learnings for me. When I came to this company, I was expecting that people are very diligent, and I learned the hard way. They're not. So I think one of the value propositions that I'm now slowly kind of starting to test is, what if you could get the benefits of a structure without having to manually maintain it? And it sounds like it's resonating with the market. So I think that's also going to be one of the areas where we combine our integrated intelligence in terms of data as source of data, and then the proprietary algorithms that we're building on top.
You mentioned that you have the data sets about projects and tasks. I believe that you also have data sets about the companies plus experts. I mean, people who are working on those tasks.
Yes, absolutely. So we're kind of building a product that cuts across those three project management dimensions. So, you could call it scope, budget, time. You could call it people, work, and revenues. There are many ways to kind of coin those areas. Some call them, resource management, work management, and financial management. So there are different ways to call it, but they all boil down to the same hard data points. We're talking about a company that has come up with a value proposition of delivering work to their clients using the resources that they have. Those resources can be, tangible, intangible. Maybe they have some intellectual property that they have developed. Maybe they have some people that are just really good at doing something, and they want to make the most out of it. So yes.
Yeah, and I concluded that the use cases that you built on top of this data are related to reporting, to see how people are working on particular tasks, how many people are working in a given project, things like that. Also, insights that you can give to some companies that maybe the way that they work is not exactly what they intended to have. Plus, I believe that also the name of your company, Forecast, means something. So maybe some forecast about the future work, about the trends, about maybe projects that the company might develop in the future with a given number of people or given competences that they have gained during their current work. So could you please elaborate more on those categories of use cases?
Yes, absolutely. I think it goes without saying, reporting as a concept is pretty much embedded into any kind of business to business type of solution, and we're a B2B SaaS company. So of course our customers want to get a view into hard data, and that goes without question. It's a universal need by now. The concept of business intelligence has been around for a few decades, and it has been kind of set as a base expectation. Like there is no B2B platform without a certain level of reporting baked in these days. But that's also just the very beginning, right? I normally in my head, when thinking about the use cases and the value propositions, follow a maybe too simplified, but to me at least quite useful model, right? There's data where as a user, I need to dig through it to figure something out, right? Imagine instead of a weather forecast, I got a table with 7,000 rows showcasing the past temperatures on an hourly basis in the region where I live. And I would have to figure out, okay, so do I need an umbrella today or not? Yes, I could maybe do it, but I need to dig through the data. Then the next level is, okay, there is a level of insight provided. So there is some kind of, kind of massaging of the data performed on my behalf so that I do get exactly those bits of information or insights. I need to interpret them. I need to think what they mean in my context. So let's say, it's going to be cloudy today. Okay, that's a good insight. Maybe I don't need to put on sunscreen in the morning when leaving the house, or maybe I should not, bring my sunglasses. But it's totally up to me. So I still need to think what to do with this. I need to contextualize that information and so on. And then there's the third level where you can call it, like knowledge. I know something for a fact, and I can immediately act on it. Like I know it will rain at 5 o'clock. So maybe I should not be leaving the office 5:30. I maybe should be leaving the office at 4:30 so that I actually get home before it starts raining. So that gives me ability to act with confidence. And this is how I think about the use cases. So as I said, those data points, reporting and so on, they're kind of standard expectations. But I think what we're now seeing with, emergence of all of the AI technologies is more on the other end of the spectrum. How do we collaborate with those machine learning and AI assistants, bots, models, platforms, there are many names for it, so that we can actually act with confidence. So one of the use cases is something that I just mentioned already about this feedback that we got being witchcraft, is from the user's perspective, very simple thing. If you open up your project scope and you're, let's say, 1/3 into your project, some of the tasks will have a tiny little yellow exclamation mark next to them. And when you click on it, it will say something along the lines, we think this task is underestimated because in your past projects, we found 3 similar tasks with a very similar description, similar people assigned to it, similar stage in the project, and the project itself was similar. And all of those three overran. So you might want to check it out. Like, this is something to maybe go back to your team as a project manager and say, okay, guys, there was this project last year, and it looks like, the models assess that they're actually very similar, right? So it's like, from modeling perspective, you have two vectors, tokenized tasks, and then we just measure the angle. And if they are similar enough, we expose those to the users, right? So that the user doesn't have to go through manually past projects and see, did we do something similar? Do we have any learnings to transfer from those projects? And this directly addresses one of the main project management principles, postmortems and learning from past projects. I've heard so many people talk about it, but over the course of my career, I have not seen that many people actually act on it, simply because it's just tedious. It's manual cognitive load to go through 50 past projects and figure out what the exact learnings should be transferred to the new projects. So we kind of, address that use case. So that's, I guess, a very straightforward example. We have some other models which, for example, help detect redundant work. And this is more relevant for larger organizations. In a large organization, and when I was working also in a corporate setting, I would constantly see people do the same thing without knowing about each other actually doing the same thing. Communication and collaboration works quite differently from a company like mine, where we are less than 100 people, to a company which has 80,000 people. So one of our larger customers were also super excited to hear that we're deploying a similarity model, which simply helps them understand, okay, is there an opportunity to optimize the overall work portfolio? Because it seems like people are actually working on very, very similar stuff, or maybe even in some cases redundant, completely the same. And then there are many other use cases that we're supporting. So, if there's something of particular interest, I can elaborate on those as well. But I think these are kind of quite straightforward examples of how we approach problem solving with AI in the space of work management.
Yeah, exactly. And does it also mean that you can integrate with third-party software, like, for instance, Jira, so that you specifically know that there are, let's say, two people from different countries working on a similar problem, because they created their own Jira tasks for that, or maybe there is something in the description of the task or in the comments that suggest that.
Yes. One other of our product principles is that we don't want people to feel like they need to lock into forecast completely. Like, we're not an either-or solution. One of the product principles was always to be open and integrate with systems that people have already established workflows in. So quite a few of our customers do indeed prefer that most of their teams work in Jira, and the value from forecast comes from forecast being kind of that intelligence layer on top of Jira. So yes, we do have two-way synchronizations with most of the work management systems, financial systems, same story. We're not trying to build a full quoting, invoicing, and procurement system, but we do appreciate the fact that once you're running a project and it's kind of the end of it, well, it would be nice if you could just automatically push all of the information about who worked for how many hours. If company is doing time tracking, all of the time tracking data. If company is not doing time tracking, then some kind of estimates and so on, so that you can also minimize that manual copy paste between systems. So yes, we do offer and both rely for additional information on third-party systems quite frequently.
And you also mentioned that you can find similar tasks that someone did in the past, and based on that suggest that maybe a given task is underestimated. And what happens if not? Let's assume that you have a task to work on some ML AI model. Let's assume that company like mine uses your product, but this time we decided, let's say, to use a dedicated machine learning platform, so that we deploy a model on production much faster than before. So we use something under the hood that accelerates this time the development of machine learning model. Or the second example, knowledge sharing is our value. So we often write blog posts about something related to our work. Sometimes we write it alone, sometimes with customers. But let's say that this time we decided to use a ChatGPT a little bit to
Right.
write this blog post faster than before. And do you also discover this in some way, or maybe ask customers for feedback, explicit data that can help you to figure out that this task, okay, it's similar to the previous ones, but this time it was developed faster because you have more resources available actually to make it happen. So it's very likely that in the future, the same task will be developed also faster.
Yes, absolutely. I think my favorite sentence here is coming from the financial industry, where whenever you get some kind of financial report, they have this, sentence saying, past performance does not guarantee future performance. So, and this is exactly, the kind of thing about machine learning models, right? It's like, yes, we are learning from historical data. We are also employing the day right here, right now. So it's not like some kind of month-old model training or something. We do have both depending on the use case. Some data changes very frequently. Some data changes very infrequently. So we employ both approaches. We have batch learning. We have online learning. We also implement feedback loops for the users where relevant. So for example, in this case of the similar tasks having overrun in the past, the users have the option to just say, nope, this is not relevant, this is not relevant, this is not at all similar, you got it completely wrong. They can discard the thing whatsoever, which also serves as feedback for us that we were kind of hinting to the user that they should think about it, and they said no. Again, we take that into account. So the feedback loop mechanisms are in place where, again, it makes sense to get that feedback from the user. But yeah, it's very difficult. We have another set of models which we call like work anomaly models, because quite a lot of our customers are feeling the pains of both. People having this internal motivation to make things happen no matter what, which in the short term is maybe good, but eventually leads to burnout. So on an experimental level, we are now looking into models which would be able to, for example, predict even things like burnout. Like this person is consistently performing well, everything is, as estimated and so on, but there is a cost at which that comes. So, simply keeping an eye on, are there any anomalous moments in time where, let's say a person like myself, I'm not an early morning person. I'm more of a late night person. So if the model was looking at my behavioral patterns, the model would figure out very quickly that usually I start working around 9:30 and I finish around 8 p.m. So that's my normal. My colleagues are completely opposite. One of my colleagues is in the office at 7 o'clock every morning and leaves sharp after work. So we have different ways of working. And as I said previously, there is no standard for how you want to work. As long as we get our jobs done, it's great. So we have explored with training the personal level anomaly models, where instead of showcasing that information to some managerial persona again, it would just be personal insights. Like, hey, it seems like your working patterns have changed. Like, are you okay? So that's another thing where we're trying to detect things where they are no longer as they used to be. But this is again quite tricky. We have another product principle, which is never throw people under the bus. Even though we get, especially from our overseas customers, requests like, well, you're saying that this project is gonna overrun because there are many, many tasks overrunning. Could you say who exactly is the reason for that? And we're like, no, we're not going to go into that space. We're not going to be throwing people under the bus. It's your company, it's your project, it's your teams. We're here to raise your awareness about potential risks. And I think this is kind of the best explanation what forecast is about. It's about trying to expose potential risks that you don't necessarily are always aware of. And in some cases, we can even offer a potential list of solutions, how to go about it. But we also, as I said, we respect privacy, we respect data requirements, and we don't want to kind of expose things where it could lead to negative situations, especially if we are wrong. Exactly to your point. What if we were wrong? So even in a simple scenario, if I predict that Dainius is about to burn out because of his behavioral patterns, and that gets all the way to my CEO, and he's like, well, if the guy is burning out anyway, I might as well just get the new product lead into the company. And the model was wrong. So, it has very significant implications. And I think this is when developing AI-powered products, we always need to think about not just, the data that we use as inputs, not the technical approaches? Is it online, offline, batch learning, and so on? And what kind of models to use? Is it GPT or is it in-house modeling efforts and so on? But also the consequences. What if we are right? What if we are wrong? What if somebody disagrees with us? Can we explain our thinking and so on? And I think this is extremely important, especially with higher implication features. And I think that's why a lot of our competitors, they're going into that space. It's very easy to say, well, yeah, I was auto-completing based on your research searches the word. Okay, what's the worst that can happen? Well, you use backspace to delete the word, you type in the new word, life goes on. But if we're talking about more impactful value propositions, which are higher value add, then we also need to think more about the implications of us simply being wrong.
Yes, those are really, really good use cases. And I also think that it should be possible for you to discover what talent and or passion a given person has based on the tasks that he or she completes. Because a person who is passionate and very strong at particular group of tasks, this person might finish those tasks faster, might create additional tasks to share the knowledge, maybe help others, maybe speak publicly about that. And at the same time, the same person might not be as efficient at a different group of tasks where he or she is not feeling so passionate or maybe so good, and maybe he or she asks very often for help. So thanks to that, you can also maybe help people or their managers to think about career path for a given person, or at least to discover the skills that could be developed further.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We don't really call it detection of passion, even though it would be a really cool model name, passion detector. But we do actually have a model which we call a suitability model. One thing to note is that we know for a fact that there are different ways of work distribution. Some of our customers are very top-down, as I said, they're very waterfall companies, or maybe not necessarily waterfall, but even in an agile setting, they kind of adhere more to the top-down practices, where people don't really get to choose what they work on based on their profiles and based on the resource manager and the project manager's knowledge. They just get assigned a specific task. John, this Wednesday, you're going to be working on this. Then the estimate is 8 hours, so you should be done by the end of the day, which means that on Thursday, you're going to be working on this. And if you don't complete it on Wednesday, well, then we will discuss how to go about it. Do we overrun it and so on, right? So that's one way. The other way is indeed, as you say, some people actually, pick and choose, and that's more agile companies. People, again, adhere to company priorities. Of course, even in agile, you have the notion of prioritization of work. But then indeed, people are kind of free to choose, I'm going to pick up this, I'm going to pick up that. So we have developed a what we call a suitability model for existing work and for future work, so that managerial effort is actually reduced. We usually score about 80% accuracy in that, based on our customer feedback, that whenever, let's say, you're starting to scope out a new project and you have scoped it out to the best of your ability of initial scoping, you need to start looking for, okay, who's going to actually execute on that work? Then our suggestions for current and future work is roughly 80% correct, at least correct as perceived by the user, meaning that they agree, yes, this is indeed a good suggestion. I'm going to go with those. And in about 20% of cases, we, for one or another reason, miss the point. But that, again, is about changing the environment. Maybe a new person joined the company and we simply don't know anything about that person yet. So sometimes we do have these cold start problems where a new company joins, and of course, we require a couple of weeks of work in the platform to actually tailor our generic predictions for that company or for that specific person. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's one of the aspects where we see a lot of potential for AI powered, let's say, resource management on a company level and also on the project level as well.
I think that 80% is a very impressive number, and I believe that you also work on improving that. So maybe you can share a bit how you work on the development of AI ML models. What technology stack do you use, or what MLOps tools you use in your daily work? Because we have already mentioned a number of models that you have implemented, also the similarity model that you mentioned before. So how do you work at Forecast with ML and AI? What technologies do you use, and what are your best practices that you developed internally?
I think in our case, we are, and not because we want to, but because we have to. We are a pretty early stage company still, where we need to be extremely pragmatic and in some cases even opportunistic, which implies that we're trying to, of course, not spend time building something that we can use to validate our assumptions. So when it comes to language understanding, one of the first technologies that we used from the outside was Google's BERT language model, which of course, saved us all of the time and effort trying to kind of build something of our own. It is available for commercial use, so why try to figure out if the difference between a sentence, I am running a project, and my project is running late. The word running has a completely different meaning in those two sentences. So if we want to interpret if there's a risk of a certain project being late, we need to understand what different words mean in the context of project management. So to minimize effort that we needed to spend on this level of understanding, we of course use pre-trained models. Same goes for the pipeline. We deploy everything to the cloud. So we're a fully cloud native company. That gives us the flexibility of spinning up and down machines based on our training needs, experimentation needs. If we just want to see if there is a valuable use case in I can give you a concrete example. Currently, we're experimenting, and we will soon roll out the first version of another value-added AI application, which is about time tracking. A lot of our customers do time tracking so that they can do accurate invoicing. And depending on the size of the company, we can be talking about anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes every week that a single person spends on simply clicking on various start-stop buttons, entering time off. Yes, I took half a day off, so minus 4 hours, and so on, and managing their timesheets. That, if we're talking about a company of 200 people, is a significant investment into a very simple thing that they need to ensure that they're basing their invoicing and optimization on accurate data. So we actually now trained a model, and that's where being cloud native is very nice. We can just easily spin up and replicate our data pipelines and machine learning environment. Try to train a model and see, okay, from a person's perspective, let's say from my perspective, if I come to Forecast on a Friday afternoon and I'm done with my week, and now I need to fill my weekly timesheet, what should have ended on my timesheet based on my past work and my allocation to projects and the types of tasks that I work? What should be on my timesheet? Maybe, and our current models in some cases even hit about 65, 70% accuracy. Again, if we're saying that it takes 20 minutes and we're taking 60 to 70% off that time, so that it's already there, and I just need to add the remaining 30%, it's already a massive value add for a company that the employees are still in control. They still get the accurate data, but they don't spend so much time on it. So for this specific use case, it's all custom built. It's mostly Python-based training pipeline. We use SageMaker. We use OpenSearch for quicker retrieval of fuzzy data. TensorFlow is one of the things that we also heavily rely on. What else is there? In terms of serving and the inference, we do have our proprietary mechanisms. So we just noticed that for us, especially with the level of control and experimentation, because again, I'm a product person now. I'm also just like yourself, not much hands-on anymore. So from product perspective, it's very often for me, for example, important to validate what levels of accuracy are good enough for people, so that we can easily A/B test not just the UIs, but also A/B test the model outputs. So for that, we have built our own proprietary infrastructure. We simply couldn't really find anything that was very with a low entry barrier enough for us to actually buy like a commercial product. A lot of insights about our users' behaviors once we roll something out are coming from Amplitude. So Amplitude is a great tool for then the behavioral monitoring of users on the platform, so that we see, okay, we designed this user journey like this, the AI kicks in at this and that step. Are people engaging with that as we designed, or did they actually find some completely new, different way that is actually more convenient for them, and we have not thought about it? Yeah.
And do you use any specific MLOps tools, such as MLflow, Kedro, or maybe dedicated ML platforms? I mean, like the technologies that can support the whole life cycle of your machine learning models.
We're slowly getting in that direction. We have not yet decided to invest time in that. Again, as I said, we're relatively small, and for us, we need to focus. We don't have unlimited resources, and our focus is currently on experimenting more on the value propositions of the models. So even if we just need to, hack together a Jupyter notebook in which we actually find some, nice little charts, and we somehow convert those, let's say, anomaly detection, right? It's like, okay, we see some distributions and variants, changing course. Let's just take that data, shove it into one of the services that hooks up straight to the UI and test it. It's less for us important to have this, traceability. And I think, again, with our larger customers, we're now starting to hear questions. Could you roll back, the previous version? Okay, we currently cannot do that. If we have a new version of a model, we have deployed that model for that company. We're not versioning our models, at least not in an automated fashion. Yes, we could dig through the code and find the outputs and so on, but that's more of a manual effort. But again, as I said, this is not necessarily the main priority right now. The main priority is to rapidly explore the distinct value propositions that AI can deliver to our customers. And then once we have found one or two or five that works, then we, of course, make sure that everything is running in an automated fashion, that we have testability also to some extent, as much as it is possible with non-deterministic nature of AI. But we're still even, trying to write automated tests for our models that we can at least monitor how they behave. But most of that is currently custom built, simply because, well, our data science folks also have engineering background, so they're like, yeah, while you guys debate which tool to buy, we already have a system in place and we're ready to run fast. And I think this is the right attitude for us right now. But it will change in the future.
Yes, and I would like to also ask about interesting trends in your industry, and specifically about AI versus humans in people management space. So do you think that AI will dominate in that industry, or maybe there still will be very important tasks that couldn't be done by AI and humans will have to do them?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So for instance, in your suitability model, do you think that you will achieve 99 or 100% accuracy? Or you will have some cases where human will be always needed to make a final judgment?
Yeah, I think this comes down less to the accuracy, but more to the responsibility and accountability. Just like, with autonomous vehicles, it's still not globally regulated because different continents disagree who is ultimately liable for an autonomous vehicle actually getting into an accident or even causing one. That's even more important, right? So with our current customers, we actually have those conversations, especially with a more eager customer group. I communicate with them pretty much every week. And we have those conversations very often about the levels of adoption, how deeply AI-powered solutions are embedded in their business, and what are they allowed or not allowed to do. So in most cases, I see that there's definitely emerging curiosity, but I think we as humans, especially in the work management space, have not gotten ready to relieve the control from our hands and give it into something. So, well, on one side, I think it is quite possible that we will, figure out who's best suited for a specific work item. But there's always, at least in the case of systems like ours, before there's a level of connectivity to other like reality data sources achieved, we will simply not know the full context. Maybe one of my team members on Slack just this morning, as today's example, wrote, "Oh, I have a massive toothache. I will just, go to the emergency dentist." There's no value if my model always knew that this person is the best suited to do the piece of work, because the model simply doesn't know that, all of a sudden the person had a toothache. So unless we're talking about, the scenario in which the AI is almighty, all-powerful, all-seeing, I don't think we have anything to be afraid of. And I think this is what also causes most of those questions. People hear about advancement in narrow AI, and they think that it can also be extrapolated onto the AGI, the artificial general intelligence. So just the fact that we got really, really good at synthesizing language and pictures doesn't mean that we got really, really good at everything that AI can do. And I think with that in mind, I'm pretty confident about our customers happily having their jobs and us happily helping them do their jobs better.
Mm-hmm. But I also think that your company, and especially the data that you have, can be very accurate barometer of the adoption of the AI in daily work. Because if you have the feature that lets you know that this particular task can be done by AI or was done by AI, you can track how much tasks in a given team or a given company was done by AI or could be even done by AI, because you can suggest the product owner that this is the perfect task for AI actually to do. Then you can see if adoption of AI in work increases or not increases, or maybe at which point it achieves the maximum value.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. We are, again, talking on a principle level as a product, we are aiming for making people better. So we call it augmentation, not automation. Quite a lot of our customers say, a typical project manager used to run 10 projects in parallel. Now with forecast after a year, they're running 15. So yes, their throughput has increased because they, can be more focused. They open up forecast instead of wandering around and digging for what to do today as a project manager, which risks to address. We try to kind of, rank the risks and say, hey, you might want to look into this space for this project, this space for that project, and so on. So we kind of guide them through their work, and that makes them more effective at what they do. And that's where we are trying to establish ourselves as the go-to platform. Whatever the profession you have in the project management space, you can be a portfolio manager, you can be a program director, you can be a resource manager, a project manager, you can be a team lead. You will basically be better. I think one of my customers and also close collaborators when it comes to experimentation, he put it very nicely. The expectation from his side is that forecast and his project management team, which is pretty large, are learning together. Because there's always going to be a spectrum, in any company, you have junior developers, you have senior developers, you can have, associate project managers, you can have program directors who are very experienced. You want to make that learning curve as short as possible so that people get to the same experience level quicker. And in return, that's what exactly AI is doing, right? AI is looking at the data and trying to figure out, okay, how can I make this whole organization run better? And I think this is very nicely put, learning together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So I imagine that, let's assume that I use your platform and I have a task, create a picture for my new blog post. Then Forecast can advise me that I can use this AI tool that will automatically generate a picture for me, and the task will be done in 5-10 minutes. Or maybe if I troubleshoot some issue, or I would like to fix the code that doesn't work, maybe Forecast can advise me like which tool that I can use, or maybe I can get information that someone already solved similar problem with this and this approach. You can also check it. So
yes.
So this could be one way of learning together and also getting more efficient in some works that we know that technology or AI can save us a lot of time.
Absolutely. For now, we will stay in the space of augmentation, though. I don't think any of our design customers, and especially the design users, would be very happy if all of a sudden Forecast was saying, it's like, yeah, you know what, you might want to cut your design task force in half because AI can generate pictures now. As I said, that's one of the principles where we want to leave certain decisions for the owners of the company. We are here merely to serve them the relevant content, and we definitely will continue doing that. But the decisions are still with the ultimate beneficiaries, business owners, CEOs, COOs, and whoever else is actually running the business. If we manage to help them in any way, we are happy.
Yes, absolutely. And last but not least, maybe, when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, I saw your job title as AI product lead. Can you maybe describe how your daily work looks like? Is there anything specific in this AI word in your job title?
Yeah, I think conceptually, AI or not AI, product management and technology in B2B, in software as a service, is conceptually quite similar. But I believe there are a couple of special AI-powered product management things or considerations. One is that we're talking about different entry barriers, or in general barriers, to introduce a product in either a new market or new organization when it comes to change management and so on. Those barriers usually revolve around trust. What I've learned over my career is that people don't like to be proven wrong. And as funny as it sounds, everybody says, "Oh, why is this model not performing 99%?" But if it was, and unfortunately the human is only 80% right, then it means that we will have a disagreement about 1/5 of the time. And that's where the interesting dynamics start happening. So we actually have to be conscious of that people in general, as users or customers, they don't like being proven wrong. So we also sometimes tone down our models, not to go into this human versus machine, but as I said previously, want to develop a platform in which people feel and perceive that they're learning together. So it's not a fight, it's a collaboration. And I think this is a special set of considerations that a product person who comes maybe from a retail sector or from a financial sector, or especially from B2C sector, doesn't really have to deal with that much. And I think the other one is, of course, all of the regulatory landscape. AI, especially as you know, in Europe, we're having European Commission heavily thinking about, and quite strictly, I would have to say, thinking about the regulatory landscape, which maybe in other domains is not as important. So I think, the product introduction considerations differ or maybe have additional complexity. And then, of course, questions like what can we do and what we cannot do are with higher order implications in AI-powered products. So that's why I think that distinction is kind of useful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really nicely described. Yes, and this question concluded our podcast episode. Dainius, I would like to thank you a lot for sharing your knowledge with us.
Absolutely. Anytime. And connect with me on LinkedIn and let's follow the conversation.
If you are interested in getting notifications about future podcast episodes, please subscribe to Radio Data Podcast on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. If you are interested in being an expert guest in one of our episodes, please find me on LinkedIn and send me a message. My name is Adam Kawa and I work at gettingData, which is a data consultancy company. If you would like to learn more about our data, analytics, AI, ML, and cloud projects and our services, please visit us at gettingdata.com.